folks, how's it going? Hello. We are going to be doing a lesson today with Braden, who is a member of the dojo. Also has been helping us out a lot lately with videos and other content. So he's a member of the team now. We're trying to get him to be better at chess overall. We all are. So yeah, today we are going to be going through some recent tournament games, and specifically just talking about time management. In particular, it seems like Braden, your issue is that you feel like you're not spending enough time at certain moments. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So yeah, let's try to figure this out because you're well, playing classical games. You've got a tournament coming up uh tomorrow.
In like
2 days?
3 days on
Oh,
the
three
first.
days on the first. Gotcha. So yeah, tournament coming up. It's going to be 90 plus 30,
Yes.
and it's not the longest time control. Like you don't get extra time on move 40, but it is classical. So yeah, it's definitely not a game where you want to be playing quickly and kind of relying more on intuition. You want to be trying to be spending more time and being concrete as
Mhm.
much as you can. But how to do that, right? How to how to do that? Actually, I'm similar to you in that I'm more of an intuitive player myself, and I try to stay ahead of the opponent in terms of the clock. But as everything, there's always a balance. You know,
Mhm.
like in many positions, you should be calculating. In other positions, the difference between one move or the other might not be that big, and so you should just decide and go on, and not waste a lot of time. Yeah, hopefully,
Mhm.
well, we can look through some of your games and see if we can kind of find that sweet spot where we,
Mhm.
because it's not like, yeah, you have to spend time every move. But on the other hand, it's like if there is a point to stop and calculate, then yeah, you want to make sure you at least stop at that moment.
Yeah.
And then whether you find the solution, right, is okay, a different story, right? But that first step is kind of sensing the moment that you need to calculate. Especially,
Right.
yeah, with I mean, some of the openings that you play, like Open Sicilian, super sharp. There are many moments here where White has kind of like one chance to seize the initiative or seize a big advantage, and then if you miss
Which
it, then
happened this time.
opponent can totally get a very nice position. Okay, so yeah, I'm assuming this is all in your book.
Yeah.
F4, bishop e7, queen f3, castles, knight d7. Actually, maybe you could take us to the moment when you're first out of book.
Sure. This is still all book. Bishop takes f6, knight takes f6, g5, knight d7, f5. Which is a known pawn sacrifice line where you get your pawn back immediately. There's
Thanks,
critical
King
reasons
b1.
why. Um, because for example, if they were to um castle here, then you can play things like queen h5 and then take on e6 if they tried to defend e6 somehow. And no matter what, like you always get the pawn back on e6 there, and sometimes you just leave it on e6 and play like bishop h3. This is kind of well-known stuff if you're a Najdorf player. It's not really important for the lesson though. It's
Yeah, I
just
don't even play Najdorf or bishop g5 Najdorf, but like yeah, even I am like aware. Like yeah, okay, like
yeah.
White's got good. Um, so yeah, we'll take your word for it. Bishop f6. Do you
So
remember
bishop
just
f6, I was
like was
out
your
of book.
opponent also kind of was he blitzing as well or?
Um, He was a little bit slower. This is all stuff I've played like hundreds of times before online. Bishop f6 is the first move out of book though, and I didn't really think this was a good move. Um, and I was trying to essentially remember exactly why, and I thought it had something to do with e6. So I ended up actually just taking on e6. Normally you see knight e5 in that position before. Um, Knight e5, you'll see queen h5, and then either queen d8 or like bishop f6 now that the
Yeah,
queen's on h5, and then you take on e6.
right.
So bishop f6 felt a little out of place because they didn't get that activity with knight e5. Um,
Yeah.
and I thought,
Okay.
well, yeah, take on e6 might be good here. So I just kind of snapped it off because it was like kind of instinct.
Well, let's back it up here because actually this all right.
Okay.
This is definitely the first interesting moment of the game. First move that you're out of book because this is a very common experience for players of all kinds of levels. Like when people are like first starting to prepare openings all the way to the highest levels. There's going to be a moment where your opponent plays something like that you haven't seen before, and then it's you have to first kind of figure out this weird meta game. Like, is this a move I haven't seen before because it's good, and you've never seen this move ever? Then like you can probably be pretty confident, like, oh yeah, it might not be such a good move, and then start to look for, let's say, like logical refutations is what I like to call it as. Like, why wouldn't this move be good, right? Well, in the main line, like black is defending e6 here. This isn't defending e6, so maybe I should take. Um, so definitely it's a good starting point to just immediately think about like the drawback principle, like what could be wrong with this move. But you also want to be very careful, and I don't think you're doing it here necessarily, but a lot of players, even if they have just like a little bit of opening knowledge, they fall into this trap of like, if the opponent plays a move that's like not in their book, then they're thinking like, oh, it must be bad, like, and I have to refute this. In many cases, like the move can be fine, it might be slightly worse than the main line, and especially if your opponent is playing white, and you're playing black, and your opponent doesn't play into the main line as white. White has a lot of options, in many openings where they can just play like a relatively normal move, get an equal position or even slightly better position, and yeah, there's no direct tactical refutation or anything like that. So
Yeah.
definitely want to be careful about being um, too aggressive to pounce. One thing I would say that's generally good to do right at this moment is to just spend a little bit of time, even if you're like 99.9% sure of the move you want to play, is just like a good habit because you never know. And I can definitely show you some examples where I kind of assumed something was the move, and then I'm just wrong. Like I just miscalculated something or I misjudged something, or what often happens, you misremember something,
Yeah.
which is kind of the worst because
Mm.
then you're kind of convinced in your mind, like, oh yeah, this was the move, this was the idea. Then it turns out, oh no, it was a different position. It was without this and this inserted, and it makes all the difference. So that's
That happens in my Rook G1 Najdorf game actually.
oh, interesting, interesting.
Really early on. So we can look at that after maybe.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's yeah, very typical thing. So spending a couple minutes just out of habit helps you defend against this kind of stuff. Because if you look at a position long enough, you might kind of trigger something and realize, wait, I don't exactly remember this 100%.
Mm.
And then my suggestion for this moment is to like always try to kind of forget what you think you remember and just start thinking fresh. Because like it's so easy to confuse yourself that you'll be better off just kind of thinking on your own as if this was a position that you haven't really seen before, haven't studied before. Obviously you're familiar with the thematic ideas, but you just start thinking on your own. And of course, you might still absolutely come to the conclusion fe6 is a good move. I mean, definitely looks like very logical and very decent. But the point is, you just want to build that habit where you're just spending a few minutes just to kind of get used to the position, actually get warmed up to playing chess itself. Because up until
Yeah.
this point, you're not really like thinking. You already know the move you're going to make because it's in your
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
And for your opponent, it might not be as easy.
Mm.
So they're already kind of ahead of you. They're like warmed up in that sense.
That's an interesting way to put it. Usually people think of it the other way around, where it's like if you know more about the position already, you're the one that's warmed up because it's stuff you've seen before. So
Right.
that's interesting.
Yeah. No, I'm sure it's been mentioned elsewhere, but yeah, that's kind of the double-edged sword of having good prep, right? It's like, okay, you know more than the opponent, so you might know more traps in the position, and you just know generally like which moves are better than others. But once both players are out of book, then they've already been like calculating and thinking and like absorbing the position for like half an hour, in some cases like an hour, like when you're really well prepped, and then you're just starting the chess game. And so it's, yeah, you have to be a little bit careful. It's like the analogy is, let's say you're naturally very smart and you don't have to study very much, and so you can just get all the way through school without studying, and then you reach sixth grade and all of a sudden it gets a little bit hard, and now you have to learn how to study. So the students that have been studying grades 1 through 5 are now ahead of you because they know how to study, whereas you've
Yeah.
just been like coasting and you just got here. And now it's like you gotta catch up. So that's another reason why it's just good to spend time thinking, because it just, yeah, warms up your brain, and yeah, generally it just takes time, I think, for most players. The other tip a lot of coaches give is to show up before the game for a few minutes and just start calculating and just start warming up your brain that way, which I think is very, very useful for many players.
Mhm.
It just takes time, and then things start moving. Okay, so yeah, I mean, we could talk about this position just briefly. The other way to kind of look at it is like, other than f takes e6, what other candidate moves could white consider here?
So for me, I didn't think there was another because I am down a pawn and f takes c6 does win back the pawn.
Sure.
That's why I kind of just snapped it off the board because it's like, um, well, like the other types of moves in this position are queen h5. That's not necessary anymore because we're not attacking the bishop on g5. And the only reason you play something like queen h5 is because the rook's on f8, and you can't take on e6 twice because your queen gets attacked after the discovery. I can quickly show that here. If instead knight e5,
Yeah.
um, or even castles, right?
Hmm.
Normally you'll play something like queen h5 to get out of the discovery on f3. Um, Whereas here, f takes e6, I can just take on f7 with check, or if they take on e6, I can always take on e6 with the knight. So I will always be grabbing my pawn back, and to me that just made sense. So I just kind of played it like instantly, just because I don't really see another move. Um, Maybe there's bishop e, but if I play something like bishop e3, maybe there's e5, then there's knight d5,
Yeah.
maybe.
I mean, the idea of choosing candidate moves is not like, you're not committing to any of these moves, right? It's just the idea is that there might be a good move that you're
Yeah.
missing, and you have
Mhm.
no chance of finding it unless you at least try to look for it, right?
Yeah,
So I don't
absolutely.
know. Actually, I haven't looked at any of these games with an engine or anything, so I honestly don't know what's the best move anywhere. But for me, like, definitely I would at least calculate e5, like not knowing this position.
Oh, as a Najdorf player, you just don't play e5 when the queen's on c7.
No, I
Like,
know
so I
I
didn't
know
even think
bishop
about
e7
it.
is an answer, but I would still
Yeah.
at least look at the move, right? I'm hitting
Okay.
two pieces.
Yeah.
So, but I get it. Bishop e7, and yeah, it looks tough. But the other move that I'm definitely considering here is knight takes b5, right? Like,
Oh. Hmm.
and I'm not saying it's
Interesting.
good, but I mean, it could be. I don't know. It's definitely worth taking a look at.
Yeah, it is. That is really interesting, actually. Um, because you sometimes see this, and I have difficulties knowing exactly when it's good. I know it's when the d6 isn't covered by like a minor piece, so you can take on d6 with check. Generally, is when it's going to be more okay. Um, for me, it's really difficult to get the 3 pawns for the piece. I love my pieces, so it's a bit difficult to assess those for me.
No, I mean, for sure, these are not easy to assess at all. It definitely is a thing that happens, and maybe it could be a good thing for you to look up just some games where knight takes b5 is played and try to understand situations where it's better than others.
Right.
It could be really interesting because, I mean, we have like new engines now, and the engines of the past maybe misunderstood these positions. I don't know.
Mhm.
But Yeah, the only thing is that like it might be worth looking at. It might end up being really strong, and it is worth just spending a little bit of time. And you can still decide on fe6 anyway, because you just think like, okay, here I'm sacking a piece. It's unclear with fe6. I'm getting a pawn. Looks good. That's totally a fine decision to make, right? It's just
Yeah.
about like spending time because you might convince yourself otherwise. And I don't know. We could look at it a little bit. I'm not uh, not clear at all what's happening here.
Queen
Black
a5 maybe.
could play, yeah, like any one of these moves. Queen a5 also. Um, so
Generally, I'm really scared of these positions as white. Because it does kind of open up your own king too, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah, I bet. Say, yeah, it's hard for black here as well.
King e7, I guess, is kind of
Say king
forced.
d7. There was king
Um,
f8 also, but
Knight takes c8.
there's
Oh, there's queen takes a2, right?
still queen a2. So it's messy. It's
Yeah.
messy. Um,
Huh. Yeah, I would discard it after seeing king e7.
right.
Um, because if queen a5 is enough, um, then I don't really have to look at anything else. Like, because I don't think queen b6 would be anything. Knight takes d6 is always possible still. Um, yeah, I'm pretty like unhappy in that position here.
Yeah, no, it certainly doesn't look clear to me at all. It's just something that I think, as
We
the
should have
Open
looked at.
Sicilian player, yeah, you have an obligation to kind of consider this kind of sack when it looks tempting. And I think, like you said, if d6 is hanging with check, like that's reason enough to at least consider it uh, pretty seriously. Um, and yeah, actually, good question from the chat. What's the best way to find positions like that? I know in ChessBase, like you can search if you put this position on a board or similar one. You can search like positions where white played knight takes b5 with a pawn on a6, and then you can bring up 1,000 games or whatever, and then you can sort by like the strongest players and find good games like that. Um, but for alternatives, for example, chessgames.com is a great resource because they have a collections page where users will put up their own collections of all kinds of stuff. So you can search knight takes b5 in their collections, and I would imagine someone has already picked out like 10 Sicilian games where that happened, and you can play through them. And this goes for like all kinds of topics. So like if you want to search for like games in the Sicilian or like cool rook end games or Karpov's best games or whatever, like I bet someone has already made. I'm sure there's tons of collections already that you can go through and find games like
It's an
that.
underrated resource for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Super useful. We should clip this and then and
And then put
then
it.
title it. Yeah.
Yeah.
The number one site you're not using. Okay. So fe6 totally fine move to my eyes, but yeah, you can spend at least like a few minutes here just kind of
Yeah.
getting your bearings.
Just a note, this shouldn't matter at all. This was a 90-minute no increment
No
tournament.
increment. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I was
Weird.
really close to not playing into it. I only did because it was supposed to be lower rated opponents and there was a trophy involved and I wanted my first chess trophy. But unfortunately a lot of like stronger players joined.
It's kind of nice, but um. So wait, so it was 90 plus zero?
Yeah, for this one. All
Okay.
my other tournaments are just 90-30, except for Canadian Open, but we don't have any games here with that. So.
Yeah. Okay, so black goes knight e5.
Mm.
And so here you spend, looks like 6 minutes, knight d5.
Yeah, I thought that was appropriate. Appropriate amount of time. I was happy with my calculations here. I was just seeing what happens if knight takes f3, and also if there's a taking on d4 afterwards. So I think I accurately assessed this. I was also
Yeah.
looking at taking on f7, but I thought knight d5 was just like, if it works, then it's just much better for white.
Yeah, maybe we could just quickly go through your calculation. So yeah, it sounds like you considered the move you played and also EF7.
Yeah.
So uh, on this one, I'm guessing you thought queen takes?
Yeah, something like queen takes, or like I doubt knight takes, but yeah, something like that. And then castles or something. There's always knight takes b5, but I didn't really think like, I thought knight d5 was more critical.
You mean here?
Yeah. No, no, like taking on f7 takes, and then, or no, sorry, knight d5 is or knight takes b5 is impossible because knight takes f3, sorry. Yeah, I
Yeah,
saw that
there
one.
you have to still move the queen, but here maybe it's still a move. Um, though I would agree if you have knight d5, it's kind of weird to sack a knight
Yeah.
when you already are getting the thing you're. So and then with knight d5, so what did you calculate here? You
So
mentioned knight takes f3.
yeah, so there's a lot of stuff like, first off, what if they take our knight and then we take theirs? We have to do the unga bunga chess of like take, right?
Right. Very
Um
good.
so knight takes c7 check, and then obviously the king moves. I think king d8 is the most challenging to try to trap this knight. So king d8, knight takes a8, and then bishop takes d4 to trap the knight. But what I noticed here is that bishop e2 is just winning. Because the knight and the bishop are hanging, and it doesn't matter if this knight gets lost because one of their minor pieces here will be lost.
Gotcha.
Um, yeah. So, and then there's also what if some sort of like knight takes at the end? But I didn't really think that this was important to look at. I thought knight b6 should be fine. Knight b6, knight d5, um, or like I think taking on f7 first. Sorry, is best. Because now we get the d5 square. Because if we play knight b6 immediately, the problem with that is that they can take on e6, and this is a little bit more complicated. I'm sure it's still fine because we can always take on c8, but I thought just take the pawn. And then obviously in this position, if they like move their queen, we can just like take on f6. My cat's like going crazy. I'm gonna bring him out of the room, but yeah, just something like that essentially. Just one sec.
So in the game we had queen takes, and then
Yeah,
we
and this was just bad.
get this end
This was
game.
not a good idea. Like I thought, so I calculated this from afar. I calculated this when I played knight d5.
Hmm.
But I think this was wrong. Um, I'm pretty sure this is stronger here with like taking on f7 and then queen b3 stuff,
Hmm. So
which
yeah,
is
at
what I
this
missed.
moment, right, you have this option again,
Yeah, and this
which
is a
now
time
looks way more
management.
tempting. Yeah, that the queen can't take.
I just saw the double pawns, and I was still in Ungo Bungo mode of just capture, capture, capture. Um, which is my favorite thing to say. Uh, And I just saw like, okay, if I just take everything, then they're stuck with these doubled pawns, super weak pawns in this ending. I should probably be better. And I don't think I was necessarily wrong. I think I was pushing, but um, it was definitely not as much as something like taking on f7 would have been. So
Yeah. Um. Right. So during the game, did you notice that this was possible, or were you more or
yeah,
less?
I just thought like I just wanted to take on f6. I think it was just like impatience. I wasn't looking for different. This is what I calculated when I played knight d5, so I just went down it instead of rechecking my calculations after each move, which I know is what I'm supposed to do,
Yeah.
but definitely something I did not do here.
Yeah. No, it can be very useful because, right, you might just find something better, and you have the time here at this point. I imagine you're well ahead of your opponent, right? Because you were kind of in book longer, and um, of course he has to calculate all this stuff as well.
Right.
Uh, so yeah, you probably have some time to spend here because EF7, right? I mean, definitely looks more tempting now.
Mm.
E7 could be something.
I did
Right.
look at e7 as well.
Okay,
I
good,
thought
good.
uh I think it was just bishop takes.
Sure, yeah. But just that it's worth considering. But I agree, after bishop takes, it looks like we didn't really achieve
Yeah.
a whole lot here as white. I mean, it could be worth looking at a little bit more, like queen g3, maybe there's something. But yeah, compared to the game or taking on f7, maybe not as promising. So I would spend more time maybe looking at
Right.
this one.
Yeah, and I didn't spend any time. I took on f6 almost immediately. As you can see, I spent less than a minute on the move
Yeah, yeah,
from
yeah.
knight d5 and knight takes f6, both 77 minutes. So,
Right. So, yeah, definitely something worth calculating here. Absolutely.
mhm.
I mean, I guess feels like Black would want to take with the knight, right? Like, and then
Yeah, but then there's concrete problems with knight c6, I believe. Um, there's also potential e5, right? E5, knight takes f6, queen takes a8. So I think
yeah,
king takes, if king takes is forced, then that's got to be worse. Like there's got to be something wrong with that.
right. So,
Um,
yeah, let's just say knight takes. There's this one, which already
yeah,
looks very very bad for Black,
very, very, yeah.
and also this one, which I didn't quite get the follow up here.
Knight c6. Um,
Let's say, okay, looks like only move queen
well,
d7,
the idea is again e5.
and then e5 could be
Maybe, yeah. But now like now the d file's opened up for the rook. At least that was my idea here. So like, let's just say e5 now.
yeah.
You can't take on c6. Important to note. Take on f6. And how do you exactly take? Like if knight takes, then there's just knight takes on f6 maybe, followed by knight takes e5, and then you can take on a8.
Right. Perhaps yeah, maybe taking on e5 first, but yeah, this looks very good.
And bishop e7, queen h5 check wins the game.
Yeah.
So now you take on d7. Oh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
sorry.
No, no, no. All good. So ef7, yeah, knight f7 looks bad. King f7 then feels
Yeah, king
like
f7. I think I looked at this after queen b3. Just looks like it's like game over almost. It's
e3.
hard to find a productive move.
So
Um,
let's just say we get out of the discovered attack.
yeah. Wait,
I
sorry.
mean, I don't know if we need to exactly find the forced win here for white. I think we can just kind of evaluate, like, yeah, I mean, looks king on f8, uh,
Equal
disconnected
material.
rooks.
We have
Um,
better like pieces.
yeah, seems like minimum if we just take on f6 and then develop the bishop. Like, how pleasant can can this be
Yeah,
for
they have to
black?
take with the pawn too, because if queen takes, then this bishop takes b5 at the very least.
Okay, yeah, hard to argue
Um,
with that.
yeah.
So yeah, definitely. This feels like not. I mean, very findable, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a matter of kind of seeing this idea. Now, if you looked at ef7 for a couple minutes and then you didn't see queen b3, and you're like not sure because okay, black has this dark square bishop, knight on e5. Like
Mm,
I'm not saying white should keep the queens on here, like no matter what or something. The point is just about the time usage here.
yeah.
Right. It's just like if there's a reason to spend time, then definitely yeah, you should spend it. Try to find the best move or the solution, and if you do, great. If not, okay, but at least you spent your time at the right moment, and that's kind of the
Yeah.
first step.